Hello guys, today we're going to be covering the second part of reproduction. The first part was asexual reproduction, where the big picture is that in asexual reproduction, one cell becomes two, and two become four, and so forth. There's no change in the DNA, so any of the offspring being made are all clones. So in all of these 5 types of asexual reproduction we talked about: fragmentation, binary fission, budding, vegetative propagation of spores. The big thing to remember is that there is only one parent that makes all the offspring, and they're clones. But today we're going to start talking about sexual reproduction. So one of the big points here is that in sexual reproduction, you have 2 cells, an egg and a sperm, to make an offspring. The female cell is called an egg, and it gives half of the genetic information that goes into the organism comes from the female, and half of the genetic information comes from the male, which travels in the sperm. So the genes from the egg and the sperm, those are called sex cells, are carried on what we call chromosomes, and we'll be talking about that next week. The key words to remember were slower, complex, and different, because sexual reproduction does take longer, it's slower. It is more complex because there are reproductive systems involved that produce the egg and the sperm. And what you end up with, the offspring, is different. Remember over here, everybody was a clone that gets made.
Sexual reproduction. The goal of many animals is to live long enough to reproduce and pass their genes onto their offspring. To ensure their genes are passed on for generations, almost all animals go through the process of sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction is when a male and female sex cell come together to create a unique organism. The male reproductive cell is called the sperm. The sperm contains 50% of the father's genes. The female reproductive cell is called the egg. An egg cell contains 50% of the mother's genes. When the 2 cells join together, the genetic material combines. The joining of reproductive cells is called fertilization. Some animals, like humans, go through internal fertilization, where the egg is fertilized inside the body. The offspring develop inside the mother. Some animals, like fish, have external fertilization. The female releases her eggs, then the male fish spreads his sperm over her eggs. The young develop outside of the body. No matter how the egg is fertilized, the offspring gets some genes from each parent. Sexually reproduced offspring are not identical to either. So the next time you see an animal, think about where it came from and how it'll make offspring. Sexual reproduction.
Alrighty, so let's get back to the notes. Sorry, it's a little dark here in my workroom. So let's look at a little bit more information. So you can see here we have the alien dad with the kind of human-looking mom, and then this is their offspring. Half of her genes came from dad, half from mom, and it equal to that beautiful thing. Alrighty. So let's look at a couple of the pros for sexual reproduction. One of the biggest things is that you get genetic variation. You're not going to have a room full of clones. Every time one sperm meets one egg, you get a very different and unique organism. No clones. You have a higher survival rate because the mamas and sometimes the papas take care of their offspring. So you have, the egg is fertilized. Sometimes the organism take care of it by carrying the new organism in their body, or if the eggs are fertilized, they sometimes will take care of the eggs and watch over them. Sort of like what birds do. A fertilized egg and a seed is an example of a fertilized egg. That's what a seed is. They can survive in really harsh conditions. So there can be, 3 feet of snow and ice, or it can be 120 degrees. And some of these seeds and even organisms can still survive. And again, kind of tying back out to the first bullet, leads to diversity, mixing of genes, and the offspring not only look different, but they are different from the parent. Okay, so those are all good things, that the genes are all mixed and you get unique organisms, that there's a better chance that they're going to survive. Not like, the yeast, it breaks off and then it's like, good luck, I hope you survive. But let's look at what are some of the cons of sexual reproduction, some of the things, disadvantages. One is that it's much slower. It can take months, like in animals. They can be pregnant for weeks to months. In some plants, it takes years. The seed is made, and it may take years before that seed actually germinates and grows into an organism. So it is much slower than, think of bacteria. Within, a day, there's millions of them. It requires 2 parents. So sexual reproduction requires a male sperm, a female egg. And sometimes finding a mate is not that easy. It can take, again, days to months to find a mate. That takes a lot of energy, might cause them to have to fight or defend, all of that. It takes a lot of time and energy to reach sexual maturity. So humans are sexually mature at about, human females, about 13, boys maybe 15. Some animals, it may take a year before they're sexually mature, and they can't breed on all that time. They're growing and becoming mature organisms. And there are less offspring. So you might get 1 to 2 offspring in animals and maybe hundreds in plants, like a ton of seeds. But in asexual reproduction, for instance, bacteria, you can have thousands within hours. So some of the cons of sexual reproduction, again, is it's slower. It takes 2 parents, and that takes energy. Plus, it takes a lot of time and energy for the organism to be sexually mature and be able to reproduce itself. And then we have less offspring being produced. So I'm going to stop here, and we will continue tomorrow.